Thank you for watching Darker Things, the series that brings you deep dives into history's most disturbing events, personalities, true crime, conspiracy theories.
Lizzie Borden's against gave her mother 40 months. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
Lizzie Andrew Borden, born on July 19, 1860, passing away on June 1st, 1927, underwent a trial and was ultimately acquitted for the murders of her father and stepmother on August 1892, Fall River, Massachusetts. The singular focus on the Borden trial for substantial attention, leading her to spend the remainder of her life in Fall River. Despite enduring community ostracism, she continued to live in the community until she succumbed to pneumonia at the age of 66, just days before the passing of her older sister, Emma. The Borden murders and subsequent trial became widely known across the United States, continuing to captivate public interest and inspiring various cultural depictions. There are prevalent myths surrounding Lizzie Borden's story, prompting a closer examination to dispel misconceptions. Now, being in approximately 120 years have passed since the events, additional information has come to light. While challenging popular beliefs about the case, the focus remains on the known facts, which include the date and location of the murder, the victims' names, ages, and details about those present in the house. Lizzie Borden's acquittal at trial underscores the absence of sufficient evidence for conviction, challenging the common assumption of guilt. While the mystery surrounding the case, akin to the Loft Room or Jack the Ripper enigma, continues to intrigue, evading logical explanations and remaining unsolved. Delving into the family back, Andrew Borden, the self-made man from the less affluent side of the Borden family, was a carpenter and furniture dealer. He also operated as an undertaker, a 19th century businessman overseeing funeral arrangement. His second wife, Abby, entered the family after the death of his first wife, Sarah, who passed away when Lizzie was 2.5 years old. Emma, 9 years older than Lizzie, retained the memories of her mother, referring to Abby as Mrs. Borden throughout her life. In contrast, Lindsay, lacking the memories of her mother, initially referred to Abby as mother until 2 years before Abby's death. The family dynamics and unresolved questions contribute to the enduring fascination with the Borden story. And then we have Lizzie. Abby marries Andrew when Lizzie is almost 5 and Emma is 14. So this is the family unit. At the time of the murders, Emma is in Fairhaven. They say in Maine, you can't get there from here. Impossible. She couldn't have returned to commit the murders and then left again. No way. Instead, she's over in Fairhaven paying a visit to the Brownells. They're not just family friends, but also her dressmakers. During her stay, she's getting her clothes made, and that's the reason for Emma's presence there. The family members present are Abby, Andrew, and Lizzie. Additionally, there are 2 other individuals to consider. Bridgette Sullivan, the family maid. She was in the house at the time, but possesses a solid alibi, since Abby Borden, the missus, had instructed her to clean the windows both inside and out. During Abby Borden's demise, she was engaged in conversation with the maid beyond the fence at the Kelly house. As for Andrew's murder, she was actually upstairs taking a break, lying down before she had to prepare the new meal. So she was in a state. John Morse is the anomaly in this situation. He appears unexpectedly for a visit on the Wednesday before the murder. He's the actual brother of the mother, Sarah Morse Borden, and resides out west in Hastings, Iowa, where he owns a farm. Morse frequently travels east, leasing out his farm, engaging in horse and cattle trading on the East Coast, and then returning to his western residence. At times, he spends an entire year in Fall River, while other times these visits are brief. On an unannounced Wednesday, the day preceding the murder, he arrives with a specific purpose. He has business with Andrew involving the purchase of cattle. He stays at the house overnight from Wednesday into Thursday during his brief visit to town. Interestingly, he sleeps in the room where Abby is later found dead the next morning. Now, despite this proximity, he possesses what they believed back then to be a flawless alibi during the crimes. Informed that his niece and nephew from Minnesota are on Lake Fawcett Street, he goes to visit them in the morning. His solid alibi, and I use that loosely, comes from the fact upon his return he is on a streetcar, and there were 7 priests aboard. Subsequently, the streetcar conductor corroborates this information, confirming the presence of the 7 priests. However, he did not recall seeing John Morse. But, for all intents and purposes, Morse, Bridgette, and Emma all have alibis, leaving Lizzie without one. Now, the significance of this discrepancy remains unclear. Now, if you are anything like me, you need some visuals to understand when things are being communicated. So here we go. The sole entrance to Lizzie's bedroom, separating the front of the house from Andrew and Abby's room, was securely locked from both sides, with Lizzie's bed positioned against it. This configuration necessitated a journey down the front staircase, traversing the entire house, and descending the back staircase off the kitchen to move from Lizzie's room to Andrew. When Abby was discovered lifeless in the upstairs guest room, the front staircase became the only potential exit for the murderer. At the time, the house was occupied by 5 individuals: Andrew, Abby, Lizzie, their maid Bridgette Sullivan, and their uncle John Morse. Now, Bridgette Sullivan and John Morse awoke at 6 a.m., with Bridgette descending to fetch fuel and locking the side door while Morse relaxed in the sitting room. Andrew and Abby joined them for breakfast. Following breakfast, the Bordens and Morse engaged in conversation in the sitting room for approximately 1.5 hours. Morse, learning that his niece and nephew were in town, opted to visit them before dinner, and Drew escorted him to the front door around 8:45 a.m., securing the screen door after his departure. Once Morse had left, Lizzie Borden descended and informed Bridgette she wasn't particularly hungry, but would have breakfast later. Andrew headed upstairs to attend his dental hygiene, while Bridgette stepped outside, experienced a headache and nausea. Andrew left for his customary walk by 9 a.m., and upon Bridgette's return, Abby requested her to wash the first floor windows. Around 9:30 a.m., Abby proceeded upstairs to complete the guest room, leaving Lizzie and Abby Borden alone in the house. Abby was in the guest room when she was later discovered murdered. Forensic examination revealed that Abby faced her assailant when initially struck on the side of the head with a hatchet, causing her to collapse face down on the floor. Subsequently, the attacker struck her an additional 17 times on the back of her head, resulting in her death.
Between 9:30 and 10:30, when Bridgette was mostly outside the house, would have presented a prime opportunity for either Lizzie or the assailant to commit the murders. At approximately 10:30 a.m., Andrew Borden returned home from the south, attempting to enter through the side screen door, which was hooked shut. Failing to open it, he moved to the front of the house and faced difficulties unlocking the door, eventually resorting to knocking. Simultaneously, as Bridgette cleaned the windows in the sitting room, she was interrupted by a knock at the door. Rushing to unlock it, she let out a frustrated curse. At that moment, she heard Lizzie Borden giggling from the top of the front stairs, a pivotal event in the case's timeline. This placed Lizzie in proximity to Abby Borden's dead body, a detail scrutinized during the inquest. Lizzie's testimony about her location at the time of her father's return was confusing and contradictory, whereas Bridgette's testimony was clear. She heard Lizzie's giggle from the top of the stairs. In Lizzie's defense, it's important to note that even if she was at the top of the stairs, her view of Abby's body could have been obstructed by the guest room bed. Andrew Borden entered the house and inquired about Abby's whereabouts. Lizzie informed him that Abby had received a note about someone falling ill and had left the house, a lie she maintained throughout the afternoon. If guilty, Lizzie may have aimed to delay Andrew from discovering Abby's body until she could also eliminate him. If innocent, the note's existence remained a mystery as it was never found, and no one came forward as the author. After Andrew Borden entered the house, he went upstairs and later descended to relax in the sitting room. Lizzie testified that she helped him into a comfortable position on the sofa, and she claimed to witness Andrew taking off his boots and putting on slippers. However, crime scene photos contradicted this, showing Andrew wearing boots. Once Andrew Borden rested on the sofa, Lizzie went to the dining room to iron handkerchiefs, discussing a nearby clothing sale with Bridgette. However, Bridgette, not feeling well, opted for a nap on the third floor instead. Lizzie later asserted that her iron flats were insufficiently hot, so she heated them on the stove and went to the barn. Accounts of her purpose and time spent in the barn vary, mentioning searches for iron to fix a door, lead sinkers for fishing, and taking pears from the yard. Lizzie claimed to spend either 20 or 30 minutes in the barn, asserting that accomplishing anything in a minute was implausible. Yet, it's more likely she spent about 10 minutes in the barn between 10 to pass the time while waiting for the flats to heat up. Upon returning, Lizzie discovered her father's lifeless body on the sofa, gruesomely mutilated by a sharp object. Around 11 a.m., Bridgette Sullivan, in her bedroom, heard City Hall's bells chime and then Lizzie Borden calling out from upstairs. Bridgette rushed downstairs to find Lizzie, who exclaimed, "Maggie, come quick. Father is dead. Someone came in and killed him." If Lizzie was the perpetrator, she would have had a brief period to conceal evidence, such as disposing of the murder weapon and changing her blood-soaked attire. However, it's improbable that Lizzie had sufficient time to accomplish these tasks. Bridgette heard Lizzie's cry and immediately went downstairs to be with her. Lizzie asked Bridgette to fetch Dr. Bowen, the family physician, but he wasn't at home. Lizzie then sent Bridgette to get her friend Alice Russell. Critics argued that if Lizzie thought an intruder murdered her father, she wouldn't have stayed alone in the house. However, she remained close to the open doorway, awaiting Bridgette's return. Her position drew the attention of her neighbor, Mrs. Adelaide Churchill. When asked about the matter, Lizzie implored Mrs. Churchill to come over, revealing, "Oh, Mrs. Churchill, do come over. Someone has killed father." Mrs. Churchill raised the alarm, and someone called the police station. Marshal Hilliard received the call at 11:15 a.m. Upon the police officer's arrival, they began questioning Lizzie, whose answers were inconsistent and odd. Lizzie mentioned going to the barn, but her time there and what she heard were unclear. She later settled on a less traumatic story, returning from the barn without noticing anything wrong. When asked about her stepmother, Lizzie initially repeated the story about Abby being called away to tend to a sick friend. However, she later said she heard Abby return and suggested someone check upstairs for her. Bridgette refused to go alone, accompanied by Mrs. Churchill. They went halfway up the stairs and gazed under the bed in the guest room, discovering Abby Borden's body lying face down on the floor. Mrs. Churchill conveyed the tragic news to Lizzie. Several officers interviewed Lizzie personally, reporting that they didn't like her attitude. Some felt she was too calm and collected. Assistant Marshal Flea asked if she knew who could have killed her parents, and Lizzie replied coldly, "Mrs. Borden was not my mother. She was my stepmother. My mother died when I was a little girl." Despite Lizzie's peculiar attitudes and shifting alibi, she was not splattered in blood, with no traces on her hair or clothing. Lizzie was taken to her bedroom, and the police conducted a cursory search due to her poor health. They briefly examined her dresses, but didn't thoroughly search for evidence. The police's barn search was criticized when Officer Medley reported seeing no footprints in the dust, contradicting Lizzie's alibi. However, it was later suggested that other officers had been in the barn before Medley, leaving footprints. During the investigation, 2 hatchets and 2 axes were found in the basement. Assistant Marshal Fleet set aside 1 hatchet as a potential murder weapon. However, a 3rd hatchet, dubbed the handless hatchet, was discovered in a toolbox in the coal cellar, showing signs of a fresh break on the handle. The ashy substance on the blade differed from the dust on other items. Lizzie's visit to the cellar, particularly her time bending over a pail containing her father and stepmother's bloody clothes, remain unexplained. Marshal Hilliard and Mayor Coughlin visited the next day and sat with the sisters. Lizzie, alarmed by their presence, asked if anyone in the house was under suspicion. The mayor informed her truthfully that she was the one suspected of the crime. Learning she was a suspect may have prompted Lizzie to take desperate action the next morning. Around 11 a.m. on August 7th, Alice Russell found Lizzie tearing up the dress in the kitchen, intending to burn it. Lizzie claimed the dress was stained with paint and needed disposal. This occurred in broad daylight in plain sight of the police, though it was never confirmed whether it was the dress she had worn on the day of the murders.
The trial of Lizzie Borden and the results was reminded that, well, it doesn't necessarily exclude somebody from undergoing something evil or dire or drastic. It's definitely a dark study. We'll leave it to you as to whether or not she's guilty or innocent. Let us know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed today's episode, we would ask that you make sure you subscribe and like so that you don't miss any more of our content. Until next time, I'm your host, Doug Duncan, reminding you that once you enter the dark, you may never be the same.